Welcome to the Civic Pulse Podcast. My name is Amina Barhumi, and I'm the Advocacy and Policy Lead at the Muslim Civic Coalition. I'm excited to be hosting today's episode of the Civic Pulse Podcast. Civic means society, and the Civic Pulse explores what's happening between our families, our neighbors, and our government. Each month, we connect with diverse influencers, changemakers, and leaders who are building a more just and inclusive future. Today, I'm honored to be joined by someone whose work has been transformational in the fight for justice and civil rights. Aasees Kaur is a senior community development manager at the Sikh Coalition, a policy and nonprofit expert, a strategist, and lifelong advocate. Aasees is a key voice in working to uplift Sikh community, combat hate, and build coalitions rooted in shared values. Her work bridges media, policy, and grassroots power, and we're grateful to have her here today. Welcome, Aasees.
Thank you so much, Amina. It's wonderful to be here with you and to share this space and time with you.
Of course. We had a moment to be able to speak together before we got started. And each of us comes to social justice work with a very personal story. You've built your career on the intersection of law and policy and communication and civil rights. What brings you to this moment? What led you to be in advocacy? And how does your Sikh identity influence your path and your purpose?
I came to this work. I grew up down south in Atlanta, and when I was younger, our family experienced, sad to kind of put it this way, our fair share of bias and hate crimes and discrimination, to the point where things had gotten quite violent and traumatizing with my younger brother at school. There were severe incidents of bias-based school bullying that led to a couple surgeries and being out of school and all of that type of stuff. And it was in that moment that I realized we didn't have trained advocates who could, we had solidarity, we had a lot of support, we had people willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with us, our family, support us however we needed it, but we lacked someone who could go to DC, someone who could go to the Capitol and be able to demand change at an institutional and a systemic level. I would say if the work we're doing wasn't needed, I think I would have been a teacher. And I was studying early childhood education when all of that stuff happened with my family. And then I changed my educational path and my career path. I ended up studying public policy, nonprofit governance, things that helped me be that person that we needed during those times. Because it felt like we needed somebody, every community, every area, every region, every city needs somebody, more than one somebody, I would say. But we needed somebody who could take all of this on, who could go into the gurdwaras, teach parents what bullying is like, teach parents how to recognize those signs, and be able to walk into a meeting with the school principal, the superintendent at the district level, and confidently and comfortably be able to say, well, what's happening isn't right. These policies need to change. We need to institute additional trainings, and we need to mandate more education so that your staff knows how to recognize bullying for Sikh students and other students. So when I saw that there was a lack of this kind of professional training, I decided that I would do it. it comes with its pros and cons because then you become the go-to person, the one-stop shop for anything that happens. If someone's leaving the country, they'll tell me their personal information in the event something happens, and then you become a one-stop shop, which obviously can weigh on you quite a bit, especially when you're working for the community and you're from the same community. This work is never quite 9 to 5. But I would say in all of my years of doing this, that I've never had a day where I questioned what I was doing with my life. Never had a day where I didn't feel fulfilled. At the Sikh Coalition, I spent several years on the legal team, and I could hit the pillow at nighttime knowing that at the very least I have genuinely helped one person without any expectations of receiving anything in return. So it's always helped me feel fulfilled, even though the work is heavy. These times are heavy. We're seeing ever evolving change in policies and things like that. It's difficult, there's no doubts about that, but I want to say at like a higher level where if we can find those moments of quiet where our state of mind is elevated, I feel very fulfilled. I feel whole. Even though it's traumatizing and we've come into these places because of that trauma, I feel complete. 3 years ago, my husband died of stage 4 stomach cancer. And I'm sure you can imagine that there's not a lot of people in our age group who have had those types of experiences. So many times it felt like, well, how am I going to belong? What do I do? My peers are not going to understand. How do I step back into a world where I feel like I was able to do the civil rights work because of the support I had at home, that all of this would be too difficult. You question a lot of things when you're faced with immense loss and life changing grief. But despite all of that, the most right thing that felt, the most right thing to me was that I needed to come back, that this is my identity, right? This is who I am. And in many ways, when my friends and family saw that I came back to this work, it was sort of like a reassurance that, okay, she'll be all right. She's gone back to doing what she loves, being where her passion is, where her heart is, that she'll be all right. It was a weird reassurance in many ways for myself and people that know me, because they're like, well, you've taken a step back from everything. But I needed that. I needed to sort of be in a cocoon for a little while before I came back. And we're not even 100 days into this new administration, and it feels like I needed to be here for all of this. I needed to be here for this moment, and that I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I was on the sidelines. So, two very moving, defining moments in my personal life that have led back that have led me towards civil rights and advocacy and community building and community empowerment type of work.
Thank you so much for sharing those personal stories and your courage and being able to continue to take steps forward, not just for yourself personally, but collectively, both for your community and for all of us. I can't help but think about the selflessness that's involved in doing that, and that's so deeply rooted in Sikh faith. Can you talk a little bit more about how your faith and your identity brings you to this moment, and being able to shape not just advocacy, but being able to help collectively your community and those around you?
For sure. A core foundational principle of Sikhi is Ik Onkar. which, will loosely translate in English to one everlasting divine being. Everything, that oneness, to me means that you and I, we were strangers up until this point. And I say that only to take it back because Sikhi teaches me that no one is a stranger, let alone even an enemy. Right? So if we're all one, even if I know you or don't know you, I have a active obligation to love you, to protect you, to defend you as an equal. That if I believe in oneness, that we all share the same divine light, that we're all born with inherent human dignity. To me, it means that at some level, I have a responsibility to protect and defend that dignity for all human beings, for all creation, because if I believe in oneness, then I need to be able to see all of creation, all beings, as a reflection of the Creator, and see and recognize that the Creator is infused within all of us. So how can I be okay with these self-created barriers and these hierarchies and systems we've put in place that take away from our human dignity that we all have as equals? So Sikhi, it's very informative for me in making choices of what I do in my life, what I do professionally, what I do, just spiritually, that it all needs to be interconnected for all of this to matter. Another, I would say, so oneness, Ik Oankar, is the guiding, principle for my beliefs in equality and equity and justice, where then all of it kind of ties back together. That if I'm going to do, I actually look at it as two ways. There's seva, the selfless service, and then there's gift. You work and earn honestly. And everything you earn is done earnestly, right? You're not cheating people. You're not um, finessing your way through systems to make an extra buck. And you're not finding loopholes and things like that. That all of it then, feels right. That what I'm doing, what I am, earning, how I'm doing that, it's all a reflection of the belief system and the values, right, that I learned from Sikhi, that I've learned from my family and just life experiences. And then if I think even a little deeper, so Sikhs have the choice of becoming initiated and becoming a part of the Khalsa, becoming Amritari. The closest, I would say, parallel, it's akin to baptism, but not quite the same because you can do this at any point in your life. And when I look at our history, I see that, Guru Sahib created a community of equals for us. I often think that if we think about when Sikhi was formed, there were a lot of geopolitical, sociopolitical, religious issues in the Indian subcontinent, ranging from forced conversions to a lack of equal, fair rights for all human beings. And starting from Guru Nanak, who revealed to us the principles of Ik Oankar, all the way to Guru Gobind Singh Ji, we see how each of our gurus reinforced the idea of oneness, right? Guru Nanak Sahib reveals to us oneness, but then Guru Angad Dev Ji makes sure that both men and women are being educated, and then Guru Amar Das Ji, they're the practice in that region used to be that if your husband died, you were going to be burned on the same pyre. In that same fire, because it was the belief was you can't have a life without your spouse, without a man. Guru Amar Das Ji abolished that practice, right? So I can make my way down of significant contributions of each of the gurus that reinforced again and again that we're all one. We all have equal rights and we all have dignity that we need to protect. And then when I think about Guru Gobind Singh Ji, who gave us our names of Singh and Kaur, right? So there was the caste system that was in practice. And oftentimes, right, if someone is up here, it's really hard to knock them down. But what you can do is uplift everyone else to that same level. So, what the caste system did in practice was it let the other person know which checkbox to put me in, right? If my last name is this, then here's where I belong on the hierarchy. You can't marry your way out, you can't educate your way out. That job is what you're always going to do. It limited people. It became a limitation. It's still a limitation. So what Guru Gobind Singh Ji instituted was all Sikh women are going to have the last name Kaur, which translates to sovereign princess. Your identity is independent of your father and your husband. And all Sikh men will carry the last name Singh, which, translates to a lion. And that's your identity, right? So if everybody now has the same last name, how can you put me in a box based on that family name? So it was a direct response to the lack of equality that, our gurus observed in that society. It's in many ways a protest that, well, we're not going to do this. If only kings, and if you're getting married or you're princely, if those were the only people who could wear a turban, well, Guru Gobind Singh Ji mandated that we're all going to keep our hair uncut. We're going to keep our hair unshorn, and we're all going to wear turbans. So while you couldn't take that away from the ultra high, you could have everybody wear it, right? So it again sort of also represented that if someone made that public declaration of their faith, which I'm sure you also understand, that the other person would know what your values are. They would know what you stand for because you've made that public commitment and you're asking everybody around you to be a witness to you practicing your values. So it became that, you could recognize a Sikh because of their turban in a crowd of tens of thousands. And if you needed help, because you knew that person has made this public declaration of their faith, it means they believe in oneness, they believe in equality, they believe in justice, they believe in fairness, that if anything was happening, you could reach out to help. And so, while there's spiritual reasons, it also served very practical reasons of being able to find the helpers.
You talked a little bit more about bullying and your history and your family story and what brings you to this moment, but maybe a little bit more broadly about what are some of those misconceptions and what are the stories to be able to tell that would, debunk some of the misinformation.
That's a really good question. I mean, so the Sikh Coalition was founded in the aftermath of 9/11, where within hours there were tons of hate crimes. Within weeks there were hundreds of hate crimes. It was volunteer run then, but then we very quickly realized that it needs to be full-time capacity, staffed organization. And it was all of those stories that initially moved people to come together, find that spirit and find that drive to do right by, to do right by fellow human beings, to do right by this world. And you make a really good point that storytelling is incredibly important. And I think both you and I can agree that reactive storytelling, in the following a hate crime or an incident, looks very different than proactive storytelling, where we can control the narrative. We can decide what is being shared, how it's being shared, and it's on our own terms. That looks so different than in the aftermath of, an incident like after Oak Creek. It was everyone was suddenly trying to figure out who the Sikhs are, and they were getting details incorrect on mainstream media and things like that. That looks very different than like us having this conversation, or, another, if this was a newspaper or somebody just doing a feature story of like Sikh celebrations, right? We just celebrated Vaisakhi. People are going to keep celebrating Vaisakhi the rest of this month, right? Covering those types of events versus covering the aftermath of a shooting or a crime or things like that look very different. So storytelling is super important. And then the second part of your question was, what are some of the current and urgent needs of the community in terms of hate crimes and school bullying and profiling, right? So when I think about hate crimes, and we've all been working to correct this, the course of all of this, but low reporting, undercounting of hate crimes and misreporting, and not even having proper check boxes it remains an issue. We've had to sort of fight for that for the systems to exist for there to be accurate reporting. But we know that these crimes are undercounted, and it's a catch-22. It's, can law enforcement agencies properly do it? Do they know how to deal with mixed motives, right? There's usually more than one motive for anything that happens. And then also sometimes at a community level, right, we think, well, should I even report it? It undercuts, I would say, community confidence if you're not being taken seriously, if there's a lack of language access, if you're not being informed of your rights as the victims of a crime, it is going to decrease confidence. And if I experience that, I might tell a friend, they might tell their friend. And if
Correct.
that third person has experienced something, they're like, well, no one really did something about it. And why do I need to report it? I'm
Yeah,
sharing this in the context of hate crimes, but this also happened in school bullying cases, right?
correct.
Where you see the bully never be reprimanded, never have any sort of consequences for their actions. The kids are like, well, the teacher never took me seriously. The
Yeah,
principal doesn't care. The principal will only talk to someone who's got an American accent and not, take my parents seriously who may have a different accent. So
there's
that, yeah, all of it, stuff that happens in our adult world also happens at the, at the in the in children's world
who
where
are
they're
more vulnerable, right? Like
hmm
who are more vulnerable, and oftentimes there's intimidation, right? Like you feel
Yeah.
intimidated and challenged to be able to bring forward. Right now in Illinois, we're working towards with other coalition partners on a holiday calendar that's diverse, that is inclusive. Can you speak a little bit more to the importance of what difference it may have made, maybe to your brother,
hmm
and to others that you work with,
Yeah,
to include a Sikh holiday?
for sure. I just a personal tidbit, because I work for a Sikh org, we naturally had Monday off for Vaisakhi, and I was just so happy. I told my
Yes.
friends, like, I'm not working today. They're like, why? I was like, I have the day off for Vaisakhi, and they were so envious. They were
Yes.
like, well, I was like, yeah, well, that's one of the perks for working for a community org. Um, but how nice it would have been if, yeah, all, kids had Monday off, where
Yes.
it wasn't, of course you can take it off and you can write a little note and this and that, but if the onus isn't on you to go out and do the educating, things just feel so much lighter. I
Mm,
remember when I was in 10th grade, I think it was world history class. The textbook must have been like this thick. And when we were learning about world religions, I read in there it was textbook this big, but maybe like this long paragraph about Sikhs, and it was completely misinformed. It said, it's a
mm,
sect of Islam and Hinduism. It's a blend of those two religions, instead, of saying it's a standalone monotheistic independent faith that
Right.
Since started in the late 1400s, and they believe in this, this, and this. But even as a 10th grader, I was like, oh man, now I gotta tell my teacher
Yeah.
that this is incorrect and you can't use this. And the responsibility and the burden and the onus falls on that one student in a class to
Yeah.
then tell all of your peers and the teacher that this material isn't right.
Yeah.
But you also made, a really good point that less inclusive schools, um, it's, I would say it's predictive of more bullying incidents, right?
Correct.
We did a report on school bullying in 2014. It was titled Go Home Terrorists. And
Mm.
then we um, redid and we did a new report on school bullying 10 years later titled Where Are You Really From? Right? Because
Wow.
that's a question
Of
we all
course.
get.
Where are you
And in
from, Aasees?
yeah, where are you really from? With that undertone. And that also hits on some of these points and recommendations about how an inclusive lesson plan, an inclusive curriculum, a calendar, all of these things make a difference in a child's education. I mean, we all have one childhood. We can't sort of, we need to make sure every kid is enjoying their childhood and, they're not being left out, and that they're having to do the extra work of informing their teachers and peers that it's a holiday. We've been exhausted all weekend from being at the Gurdwara and doing seva and having a Nagar Kirtan and doing the parades and all of this stuff that, this was a big deal for us.
Yes.
Um, so something like that, I mean, it would be incredible to have calendars that reflect all the students that school districts serve.
What is something that you share with our listeners, to give them a sense of hope? We are in difficult times. What grounds you, and what is some advice that you can give to our listeners?
Yeah, I think if we were to cover everything that's happening right now, we could be talking for hours.
Yes.
Immigration on its own is a whole thing. Removing efforts of equity and inclusion in schools is a whole thing. We're seeing that in Connecticut, Texas, Ohio, Kentucky, North Carolina. You mentioned, efforts in Chicago. That's a whole episode on its own.
You talked about what grounds you, but if you were to give your 18 and 20-year-old self, right? It's the college students really, and the students that are being targeted now. How
Yeah.
would you give them advice about how best to ground themselves, root themselves, give themselves time and energy to be able to keep at it? Because it is a long haul effort.
Yep. We have to remain in the trenches for, it's really a marathon.
Yes.
It's tough. And I would say there's so much in this world that is happening that we cannot control.
Hmm.
But what we can control is our little corners of the world.
Yeah.
Um, so if we can impact change, if we can manage and redirect what happens in our little corners of the world, right? You're in Chicago, I'm in Ohio.
Mm,
We have friends in every state.
me too.
If we can do our part in our little corner of the world, that in and of itself it's an incredible act of
Yes.
service, of surrender, right? You're sort of working within the laws of nature too. Like, okay, this is happening. We can't control all of that, but within my own free will, I am choosing to do this in my little part of the world where I can impact change, right? Your acts of courage and your acts of resistance and protest can look different.
Mhm.
It can be you're making calls, you're writing postcards, you're reassuring your neighbors, and that act of kindness and the ability to lead with compassion can take many forms. So take the time to figure out what works for you.
That's so beautiful, Assis. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your courage, for your selfless acts of working towards a really important mission, and for sharing your time with us today. Thank you again for tuning to this episode of the Civic Pulse Podcast. This wouldn't have been possible without our producers, Mohammed Ahmed and Subhan Ashrafi. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Spotify, and visit us at the MuslimCivicCoalition.org podcast. And don't forget to follow the Muslim Civic Coalition on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X, and LinkedIn. Peace and power to you all. Until next time.